I cannot take it anymore. Not the constant pressure to be perfect, not the way every loss turns into a headline, not the feeling that I have to carry everyone's expectations every time I step on court. Because I'm exhausted trying to prove I'm strong enough for this level while barely having space to breathe, and I don't know how much longer I can keep pretending it doesn't affect me.
The words did not come out in anger, but in quiet devastation. The kind that settles after months of holding everything inside. Subscribe to the channel for more update. Bull. Because what COCO Gauff admitted in that press conference was not a fleeting frustration, but the culmination of years spent growing up under the most unforgiving spotlight in modern tennis. A spotlight that transformed a teenage prodigy into a global symbol long before she fully had the chance to become an adult. To understand the depth of her confession, it is essential to revisit the moment her name first echoed across the sport. When, as a young teenager, she stepped onto the grass courts of Wimbledon and stunned a former champion in a victory that felt like a cinematic turning point, but in reality marked the beginning of relentless scrutiny. Overnight, she was no longer just a promising junior with potential. She became a storyline, a marketing dream, a beacon of the future. And with that transformation came expectations that few athletes twice her age could manage. The tennis world has always celebrated youth, but it often forgets that youth also means vulnerability. And in Gauff's case, every milestone was amplified, every setback dissected, every facial expression parsed for meaning. As she climbed the rankings and began reaching the latter stages of Grand Slams, the narrative shifted from hopeful excitement to measured demand, with commentators no longer asking if she would win a major, but when. And soon after, why she had not yet done so consistently. That transition from surprise contender to expected champion carries a psychological weight that cannot be measured in ranking points or prize money, because it alters the lens through which every match is viewed. Within the WTA Tour environment, players frequently speak about the grind of travel, the constant relocation from continent to continent, the jet lag that disrupts sleep cycles, and the practice session schedule before the body has fully adjusted. But for a player like Gauff, the logistical strain is compounded by sponsorship commitments, press conferences, and the invisible pressure of being perceived as a role model for millions. The modern tennis calendar leaves little room for reflection, with tournaments stacked in succession and limited downtime between high-stakes battles, meaning that emotional recovery often lags behind physical recovery. Sports psychologists have long warned that early success can create an identity trap, where an athlete begins to equate self-worth with performance, and in Gauff's case, the global branding of her image as poised and resilient may have intensified the burden to appear unaffected. Her candid admission that she feels unable to keep pretending signals that the gap between public persona and private strain has grown too wide to ignore. Specific moments on tour over the past seasons illustrate the mounting tension. From narrow Grand Slam defeats where she stood at the podium praising her opponent while absorbing the sting of expectation, to hard-court losses that sparked immediate online criticism questioning her consistency. Despite her young age, each defeat became not merely a competitive setback but a narrative referendum, with analysts debating technical adjustments and social media threads speculating about mental toughness, as if the normal developmental arc of a young athlete were a flaw rather than a process. The pressure intensified after her breakthrough major title, a triumph that should have provided validation but instead recalibrated the standard, because once an athlete wins at the highest level, every tournament thereafter is judged against that peak. Reports from within the sports community suggest that even during training blocks, Gauff faces constant reminders of her status, from autograph lines stretching beyond practice courts to cameras capturing warm-up drills, creating an environment where privacy is scarce and introspection becomes difficult. The comparison culture inherent in professional tennis further complicates matters, as rising stars are routinely measured against legends, and every statistic invites parallel analysis, reinforcing the perception that anything short of dominance constitutes underachievement. The mental health conversation in tennis has evolved significantly in recent years, particularly after other high-profile players stepped back from competition, citing psychological strain. And Gauff's confession situates her within that broader dialogue about sustainability and emotional transparency. Unlike past generations who were often encouraged to suppress vulnerability, today's athletes are navigating a landscape that both applauds honesty and scrutinizes it, creating a paradox where openness can inspire support, yet simultaneously fuel debate. Observers note that Gauff's demeanor during the press conference was not dramatic but weary, her tone steady yet heavy, suggesting that the breaking point she referenced was not sudden but gradual, the result of cumulative stress rather than singular controversy. Within locker rooms, the conversation about burnout is more common than public audiences realize. As players quietly discuss the toll of year-round competition and the challenge of maintaining motivation amid relentless travel, however, few voices carry the weight of Gauff because she represents a generational bridge between emerging stars and established champions, and her vulnerability disrupts the myth that early success guarantees emotional insulation. Analysts emphasize that teenage prodigies often face a unique trajectory, skipping the anonymity that allows incremental growth and instead accelerating into global recognition, which can stunt the natural process of learning from failure without magnified consequence. In Gauff's case, every technical adjustment becomes content, every coaching decision subject to speculation, and every loss interpreted as either crisis or character test. The media ecosystem thrives on narrative arcs, yet the athlete living inside those arcs rarely controls their framing, and when headlines oscillate between praise and criticism, stability becomes elusive. Her admission that she feels exhausted trying to prove she belongs at this level underscores the invisible labor of defending credibility, a task compounded by the fact that she has already achieved more than many veterans. From a competitive standpoint, her results remain impressive, with deep runs in major tournaments and sustained ranking presence. But the emotional currency spent achieving those milestones may exceed what statistics reveal. Experts in performance psychology highlight the importance of rest cycles, mental detachment, and structured support systems, noting that without intentional boundaries, prolonged stress can erode intrinsic motivation. The governing bodies within tennis have introduced wellness initiatives, yet structural realities such as mandatory press obligations and ranking-based entry requirements limit flexibility, particularly for players striving to maintain top seeding. Fans often interpret resilience as perpetual composure, but resilience also involves recognizing limits, and Gauff's statement reframes strength as the courage to articulate vulnerability. Her breaking point, therefore, is not a collapse, but a signal. A recognition that ambition without balance risks unsustainable strain. The ripple effect of her confession extends beyond individual narrative, prompting discussion about how tennis markets youth and how quickly it demands return on promise. Sponsorship campaigns frequently spotlight young champions as embodiments of future greatness. Yet, that branding can intensify scrutiny when results fluctuate. Within the broader cultural context, athletes are increasingly viewed as multidimensional figures rather than performance machines. And Gauff's honesty contributes to redefining success not solely as trophies, but as sustainable well-being. As analysts continue to parse her words, the most significant takeaway may be the normalization of emotional fatigue in a sport historically associated with stoic endurance. Whether her statement leads to schedule adjustments, strategic recalibration, or simply deeper public understanding remains uncertain, but its impact on discourse is undeniable. In a world where teenage prodigies are often fast-tracked into global iconography, her confession serves as a reminder that behind every headline is a human navigating expectations far heavier than applause. Suggests the next chapters of her career will unfold under the same bright lights, yet perhaps with a renewed awareness that transparency can coexist with ambition, and that acknowledging the weight of fame is not weakness but evolution and how the sport understands the athletes who carry it forward.